Hi, my name is Jeff Davies, and I'm the owner-operator of Cybernautic Studios here in Mesa, Arizona. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the free software Blender to create decals that you can then use on your clothing in Character Creator and iClone. These decals will be full PBR materials. PBR stands for physically based render. And they contain channels for color, ambient occlusion, normal maps, roughness, metallic, bump height, emission, specular, and the alpha channel. Basically everything you need to have a PBR material in iClone or Character Creator. You can also use these textures to create tattoos or surface materials for any objects that you may have in iClone. So there's a lot of flexibility in having these PBR shaders and being able to make them yourself. Once we have these shaders, we're then going to apply them to the character that you see here, which is my Capt Sanchez character. We're going to create a name tag to go on his chest, and we're going to create a rank insignia to go on his collar. Now, when we do this, it's going to change the color of the jacket to what it should be. I don't know why it comes out like a light denim by default, but as soon as we go through this process, even in the early stages, it's going to fix it so it really matches the pants. Okay, so with that said, let's get started. To create PBR materials, we're going to use a software called Blender. Blender is a free software package. However, don't be fooled by the word free. It has a huge learning curve. It takes a while to master it, and by a while I mean years. However, in this video, I'm going to show you just what you need to know to create decal PBR textures so that you can use them in iClone. So we're not going to learn all of Blender by any stretch. We're going to learn a very narrow sliver, exactly what you need to get going in this video. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to blender.org, and we're going to hit the download page, and we're going to download the most recent version of Blender. Now, I'm using Windows, so it defaults to a Windows download, but they also have versions for Mac and Linux if you are using those platforms instead. So go ahead and download Blender and get it installed. Once you have it installed, start Blender, and your screen should look like this. So when you first open Blender, it should look something very similar to this. You're going to have what's called the default cube in the middle. Should already be highlighted. When I'm recording this for you, I'm using something called screencast keys. Screencast keys will allow you to see exactly which mouse button I'm pressing and which keys I'm pressing when I'm operating in Blender. It makes it a little easier to learn. Also, if I happen to forget to mention what I'm doing, you can always just pause the video and take a look, and screencast keys will show you what I did. So we're going to single click on the default cube, and we're going to hit the delete key, and we are ready to go. Now, most of the work we're going to do, we want to be looking straight down. So there's a couple ways to do that. If you have a numeric keypad on your keyboard, you can hit the 7 key, and that will give you a top-down view. You know it's top-down because a Z is highlighted here. Now, alternatively, if you don't have that, you're working on a laptop, you want to make sure you have this Navigate Gizmo turned on. That's what this is called. And you do that by hitting the Gizmos panel, and you see Navigate and turn it on or off. Make sure it's checked so it's on. You can just click on the Z, and that'll give you a top-down view also. Okay, so that's it. Either way, you want to be in the top-down view for the rest of this time we have in Blender during this tutorial. So let's get started modeling our decals. In this video, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to create decals. One are just going to be geometric shapes. We're going to use this for the rank insignia on the collar. And the other is going to be text-based. So let's start by modeling the insignia. So we're going to go into our scene collection, and we're going to right click and we're going to click new collection, and we're going to double click on that, and then we're going to name it, not scene, I want to call it rank insignia. And I want to create another collection, and I'm going to call it name tag. Why did I create collections? Because I want to be able to manage these things separately from each other. It's just a way to organize information in Blender. Quite honestly, I wish iClone had a more robust system similar to this, but I take advantage of it all the time in Blender. I suggest you do too. So we'll start by clicking on the rank insignia collection, and we're going to create our rank insignia first. So to do that, we're going to hit Shift A and add a plane. Now, just so you know, this red and white circle in the middle, that's called the cursor. The cursor indicates where your objects are going to be created. I want to first scale this object so it looks more like a bar that might sit on a rank insignia than a square. So I'm going to hit S to scale, and I'm going to scale it on the X axis. That's the red axis you see cutting across horizontally. And I want to get that down to where I think that's about appropriate for a bar. Now I want to go into edit mode. So to do that, I hit the tab key. And then with all of these selected, I'm going to hit G, which is to move, and then X. And I'm going to move it out to right about here. The reason I go into edit mode is because when you move the mesh, it leaves the origin of the mesh. See this yellow dot here in the center? Leaves the origin in the center. And we're going to rely on that in just a moment, and I'll show you why. So now we can get out of edit mode by hitting tab again. Now we're back in object mode. You can always see your modes up here. Now in object mode, what I want to do is the rank insignia we're going to create is going to have a bar, a triangle, and then another bar. And in my sci-fi world, that rank insignia means that you're a captain. So to get the other bar, we could copy and paste and do stuff like that, but I'm going to show you a much easier way that leverages a tiny fragment of the power of Blender. We're going to add a mirror modifier. And the reason we added this, or we edited this to leave the origin in the center, is because now this mirror modifier is going to mirror on the x-axis by default, and it's going to mirror depending on where that center object is, or the origin of that mesh. And just so you know, I'll use these terms vertex, mesh, and face a lot. A vertex is simply a point. So this is an overall mesh. It has 4 vertices. All 4 are selected. If I just click on one, it has 1 vertex selected. If I hit A again, it's got all. Up here we have controls. I can also select sides if I wanted to, and I can just click on that side. Now that side is selected. Or I could click on the face and select the entire face. For the most part, I'm going to stay with the vertices here, and we're fine with that. So now let's create that triangle in the center. So we go back to object mode, and I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to create a circle. And by default, we're going to come down here where it says Add Circle. Don't click on anything else. Go right to Add Circle, and you'll see it as vertices 32. How do we make this a triangle? Well, if we just make the vertices 3, we have a triangle. So we're in good shape there. Radius looks good all around. Now I'm going to go into edit mode, and now I'm going to select an edge, and I'm going to select this bottom edge, and I'm going to say G to move it, and I'm going to move it on the Y axis. We'll move it to right about there. And that overall is basically what I want. So now I'm going to hit A to select all of the edges. You can do this if you have vertices too. And I'm going to press the F key, and the F key will fill in that empty object. All right, so it'll add a face essentially to that mesh. So at this point, our rank insignia is modeled. I'm not going to worry about adding any thickness in this particular instance. I'm going to keep this as being totally flat. And I think it's going to be sufficient because you're not really up close on the detail when you're looking at the character wearing the uniform with the name tag and the rank insignia. In current times, the rank insignia is a separate thing that you pin onto your uniform. But in the future, your uniform may be able to just automatically adjust the rank insignia to what your rank is. Same thing with the name tag. And being a science fiction show, I tend to go along those lines. So we're going to leave this flat. Now we have our rank insignia done. If you are still in edit mode on the triangle, you can get out of edit mode by hitting the tab key again. Now over here, if we look at the plane, we can see that it has a modifier. And that's the modifier we added, the mirror modifier. But we don't really want to keep that around. We want to apply it. We want to make it real. So if I go to the modifiers for the plane, you'll see here's the mirror modifier we created earlier. And we just hit apply. Click on this down arrow and apply. And boom. Now this plane is actually two things. Okay? So it's one mesh, but it's a disconnected mesh. Now I want to join all of these into a single mesh that represents the captain's insignia. So I shift click on the circle. We're going to give the whole thing a better name soon. I'm going to hit Control J to join them. Now they are one mesh. And we're going to rename this, just double click on it, rename it to captain's insignia. Don't use apostrophes when I name these things. And we're good. So we have a mesh. We're all set. Our insignia is modeled. One other thing I do want to do, though, because we did make some changes, actually, so we're not quite done with the modeling. I'm going to, with the insignia selected, hit Control A and apply scale. And you'll see the scale over here now says 1 all the way across. And that's what you want in Blender generally. You want to be dealing with things that have a scale of 1. I won't go into why, just trust me. So now let's hide the insignia, the whole thing. So we're going to hold down the shift key. We're going to mouse over the collection because I want to hide the collection and everything in it. Now we're going to click on and select the name tag. And now we're going to create the name tag decal for the captain. Shift A. This time we're going to select text. So with the text selected, we go into edit mode, hit the tab key. Backspace 4 times to get rid of that. Captain, press the enter key. Sanchez is this character's name. Press the tab key to get out. Now overall, I want to change the font that we're using here. So I want to go to the Fonts tab, click in the font subsection. Right now you can see it's using the B font, which stands for Blender Font Regular. I'm going to change this. I'm going to hit this folder icon here, and that's going to open up my fonts folder. I'm going to search for Arial, because I want to use an Arial bold. I find Arial black is a little too bold for my needs or my preferences, but it's up to you. But you can use any font that you want. I'm going to press open font. Now it says Arial bold. Okay, the other thing, how are we set here? Wow. Let me move my screen over so you can see what we're doing here. So we went down to the font section, we hit this folder here, and we selected Arial bold. That's essentially what's happened. Now, I want to go to the paragraph, and the paragraph has a line spacing. These, I want to tighten them up a little bit. So I'm going to reduce the line spacing. So I'm going to mouse over. You see I get the double-headed arrow. Before clicking, I'm going to hold the shift key, which allows me finer grained control. And then I'm going to click and I'm going to drag left. And that will tighten that up. You could see it's at 0.7 now for the line spacing. You could also just click on it and say 0.7 if you have a known quantity that you want for the spacing between the two different lines. So let's rename this text and let's call it Capt Sanchez, so we know what the name tag is. Now our next step is going to be to add a texture or a color to both of these insignias. They're going to be the same. So let's see how we do that now. So when we do this, I'm going to say G. So I've got Captain Singh selected. I'm going to press, let's see, select Captain Singh, hit G, and I want to hit Y to constrain it to the Y axis. And I'm just going to drag that down. Now I'm going to go back to the rank insignia that you can see here. I'm going to hold down my shift key and I'm going to click on the eyeball, and so it makes it visible again. We want to create textures that we're going to use for both of these, and we're going to use the same texture for both. So let's select the rank insignia and let's go to the shading tab here at the top. And gives us a different angle of view, and that's okay. Now, every material that you apply to a mesh has to occupy a slot. So we're going to create a slot to hold our material. As you can surmise by looking at this interface, a single mesh can have multiple materials associated with it. We don't need to do that now. We just need to use one material, so we need one slot. I hit New. By default, it comes up with the name material. I'm going to change that to insignia. And again, by default, it's going to come with a base color of white, which I'm generally happy with, but I'm going to click on this base color. Let me scroll in a little bit so we can see it. This is slow because I've got the screen recording going on. Blender is usually far more robust. Let's click on this base color, and you can see it's dead center white. I'm going to click on hex, and you can see that it's even on all the colors, the red, green, and blue. I want to probably, we'll probably just leave it as a default right now. I want to bring its metallic up. I want to make it shiny. And because I'm bringing the metallic up and I want it shiny, I'm going to take the roughness down, not to 0, but to about 0.75. And the specular, I'm also going to take that down a little bit, so it's not too specular. Now we could give it an emission if we wanted to. I don't want to for this. I'm still experimenting with that. But if you wanted to have a decal that glows, I would enter the emission and then pop the emission strength into whatever you want it to be. 1 is often fine. 10 is often sort of the higher end, but you just have to experiment with it to see what works for you. So now, let me click here. Our captain's insignia has one slot that uses the material insignia. So now let's click on the font or the name tag. Same thing here, slot, we're going to create a slot. And then instead of creating new, we want to reuse the material we just created. So we click on this down arrow. This is the material icon, by the way. It looks kind of like a beach ball. Click down and then just click on insignia. And it's going to show you that it's using the insignia material. And this shows you that there are 2 users of this material. So if you modify this material, it's going to modify the look of both users. We can make it, what's this at? E7, I'm going to copy this so I can paste it back in easily. If we want to make them red, we can make them red. If we want to make them green or blue or purple, it will automatically happen. I don't want that, I want white, so we're going to paste our original value back in. And they're both using the correct texture. Okay, so let's go back into layout screen. Now, so we've got a texture and we've got the meshes. And if we were going to stay in Blender, that would be sufficient, but we're not. We're going to create PBR materials for us to use in iClone and Character Creator. So to do that, we need to create a UV map. And once again, this is super simple to do. It's just going to be a couple of clicks. So we're going to select our captain's insignia to start with. We're going to go into edit mode. We want to hit A to make sure we select all or everything. And then I want to press the U key to unwrap. And when we unwrap it, we want to select project from view bounds. None of these other ones, all right? Very often you'll use the other ones in regular Blender modeling, but for our specific purposes with the decal, we want project from view bounds. So we select that and we are good to go. We now have the UV map. How can we tell? Well, let's click on the UV editing tab and you can see it here. So I'm gonna with my mouse in this window, because the commands you enter apply to wherever the mouse is in Blender. I'm going to hit A for all. And as you can see, it went to the bounds of the UV. I want to shrink this on the y-axis, which is the up-down axis here. So I'm going to say scale Y. And I'm going to bring that down until I think that's about the aspect ratio I want on the rank insignia. Okay, so I want it to be a little wider than it is tall. And we're good to go there. So next, we can go back to our layout mode. I'm going to select Capt Sanchez. Now, here's an interesting thing. We can't really unwrap a font. So we have to convert it to a mesh. So we do that by going to just right-clicking on it. Select it, right-click, and say Convert to Mesh. Now it's no longer a font. You can see that the icon has changed here to this inverted triangle. That means it's a mesh. Now we can go into edit mode, hit A to select all, press the U key to unwrap, and once again, project from view bounds. And then we go back to UV editing. With the mouse in the UV editing window, we hit the A key to select all, G, and then, not G, sorry, S, and then Y to scale on the Y-axis until it looks correct. Okay, you can use the mouse wheel to scroll in and scroll out. I think the ratio there looks like what I want to see on the uniform, so I think that's a good aspect ratio. We can hit tab to get out. Go back to the layout, and now we have UV maps created for our textures. Okay, now it's time we bake our textures. Blender uses the term bake to mean creating the individual image files for every channel in a PBR or SSS or any other sort of texture, okay? And it's these images that we're gonna need to bring into Character Creator in order to apply our decals correctly and have them look really good. So there's a couple ways to bake textures. One is the totally free way. You can do this in Blender on its own. However, I'm going to give you a fair warning. It's labor intensive, it's error prone, and it's going to take maybe a couple of hours of work to get done. I don't know about you, but I am far too lazy to do that. So instead, I went to a website called BlenderMarket, and I suggest you do the same if you have $16 you can spare. Let's go here. Okay, so go to BlenderMarket. I'm already logged in, and let's just search for Simple Bake. Okay, I gotta look past my microphone to find it. Hit Simple Bake and search. And the first one that comes up, and you see this icon from Haughty Gray Alien, you're in business. So it's $16 to $80. It's going to cost you, if you're a single user, 16 bucks. Believe me, with this add-on, as you're going to see in this video, generating these textures quickly and easily is so simple, you'll never go back to doing it the free way. Now, if you can't afford the $16, that's a different story. Look for links in the description, and I will link to a couple of tutorials on YouTube that show you how to do it manually. but I'm not going to cover the manual process in this video. So, a couple other things about BlenderMarket. This is a great way to manage all of your add-ons in Blender. Let's see, I can go to my orders, and you can see all the crazy stuff that I have ordered in the past. And if I go to, let's just search for simple. Here's the simple bake that I ordered. If I need to go back to it and say go to downloads, it will show me the most recent version. So here, since we're using Blender 3, we want to use the one for Blender 3 Plus, all right? So when you go to download this, this is the one you want. If you're using Blender 2.9.3, I don't know why you would. Blender 3 is out, it's stable, use that. But you would use this one instead. Download it, and then we're going to be ready to install the Simple Bake add-on in Blender, all right? So with that, let's go back to Blender. And in order to install an add-on, I've already got it installed, but I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. We just go to Edit, Preferences, Install, and then you go to wherever you saved your Blender add-on. So I actually have a Blender add-on folder where I keep all of my add-ons so I know where in the heck they are and I can find them when I need to. And here we're just going to go down to Simple Bake. Okay, so here's our Simple Bake, the one from BlenderMarket. And I would normally just say install add-on. Do this and it's going to install the add-on for you. Now I'm going to skip over because I've already got it installed, but I'm going to show you what you need to do right after this finishes if you say install add-on. Okay, so here's Simple Bake. What's going to happen is you're going to see Simple Bake show up in this list. You don't want to have to type in simple. It'll be the only thing here, and it's going to be unchecked. Press the checkbox to activate it. You want to have this active in order for you to use it. If it's unchecked, then it's not active and you can't use it. And there are reasons why you might want to do that with different add-ons. I won't get into that now, but just check it so it's ready to go. You can then hit this little menu down here and say Save Preferences, but normally if you have autosave, you're good to go. You don't have to do that. Okay, so that is Simple Bake. Simple Bake is now installed and ready to use. And you know it's installed because if we go to the Render Properties tab, this thing that looks like an old TV or radio, and we scroll way down, you're going to see a Simple Bake section. This section up here where it just says Bake, that's where you bake your images one at a time. With Simple Bake, we're going to bake 16 at a time, and it's going to be blazingly fast. So in the next section, we're going to go into the details of baking your textures with Simple Bake. Okay, this is our last step in Blender, baking the textures. After this, we're going to go into Character Creator, and I'm going to show you how to use these textures to create decals on your character. Go into your Render Properties tab, and you want to select PBR Bake, because we're baking PBR textures. If we click on Settings Preset, it should automatically say PBR Bake. That's okay, just leave it like that. Now we go down to Bake Objects. And here we're going to add our two. So the first one is going to be, we select the name tag Capt Sanchez, and we hit Add. And then we select Captain's Insignia, and we hit Add. We want to make sure both of these are unchecked. We won't go into the details of why. It's not really important. You probably get by just fine with that. Now in the PBR Bakes, here we define which channels we want. We always want diffuse, that's the color channel. We did specify some metalness. We're not doing any SSS in this, but if you need SSS textures, you can specify those. We want a roughness map. We want a normal map always. We don't really need transmission because it's not a clear material. We also don't need the clear coat. We also don't need emission. Now, if we did want to have a glowing light or something like that, or if we wanted to have, say, the rank insignia glow, we could include emission, but we're not going to do that for this one. I then went specular because we also modified that. I went alpha because that's going to create the mask that iClone and Character Creator require in order to mask out the PBR correctly. And then also like that bump. We don't have a whole lot of bump in this, but that's okay. Good habit to have a bump map. Now let's go to special bakes. Depending on the type of texture you're creating, you may want a curvature. We don't need one for PBR, but I do like to have ambient occlusion. I just take the defaults. It's going to denoise it with cycles. That's fine. Don't even worry about what cycles is. We're really not going to mess with that too much. Under texture settings, since these are really simple and you're going to be viewing them at a distance, a 1K texture for each one of them is going to be fine. If you had a really crazy intense texture that was going to be sort of large scale that your users could see, you'd probably want to go to a 2K or a 4K. If you did want to go up, just hit like the plus 1K and it will add 1K each time. So that's 2K texture, that's 3K texture, that's 4K texture, and you see it modifies the output at the same time. But 1K is good enough for us, so we're going to bake at 1K, and our output is going to be 1K. Okay. Now I want to check all internal 32-bit float. I want to check transparent background. I want to uncheck multiple objects to one texture set. And I want to check clear bake image before bake. So we just get rid of whatever old image we have. You'll find you may have to bake these things a couple times. Another good reason why you want something like simple bake that makes it easy. Now we go into export settings. Oh, unavailable blend file is not saved. So it gives us an error message. I say file, save as. And I'm going to call this the Capt Sanchez decals.blend. You can ignore these older ones. These are ones I was playing with when I was getting all this figured out. Okay. And now I can say I want to export the bakes. And I want to export them to simple bake / the default. This double slash means in whatever directory your Blender file is, that's the directory where it's going to create the simple bakes folder for you. Okay, that's all it means. If you want to specify a different hard-coded path, you can do that here. Click on this folder icon and it will allow you to select the folder you want to put it into. I prefer to keep things relative, so that's fine. I'm going to do all export 16-bit. This is fine. Otherwise, I think it comes out as 8-bit, which is not as good. We want some detail here. Let's see. Export format, we want PNG. I like PNG because it has transparency. Keep internal images after export. That means as it generates the images, it's going to keep them in Blender. It's not that critical for us, but it doesn't hurt anything, so we'll just leave that checked. Now we go to UV settings. I'm going to select that we're going to have a normal. And I want to uncheck everything else. I want it to not create new UV maps, or prefer existing ones, or restore, just like that. Okay, so uncheck everything. Other settings. Now instead of bake 1, this is just appended to the name. So what I would like to append is the level of detail of the bake. And in our case, they're 1K bakes. Also, you can do GPU compute. Now I've got a RTX 2090 Ti, which when I first bought it was rocking. Now it's a little old. But you don't really need GPU compute for something this simple. You can do CPU, and it tends to be simpler as a result. I want to bake these in the foreground, which means I don't really need to be using Blender while I'm doing the baking. If you're baking 4K textures, the baking can take quite a while, and you may want to stay in Blender to do other work, but we'll say foreground, and we just press the bake channel. Now, before I press this, I want to show you, so I've got nothing in Simple Bake currently, no files. So we go back here, we hit bake, and you'll see down here that it's making progress and how quickly it does each bake. And as it does those bakes, you'll see that each individual file pops up here. So I Alt-Tab, and it says, just that quickly, that was real time, I didn't compress it, 16 images were baked. This would probably take you well over an hour, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours if you're brand new, to do these bakes yourself. So now that we have the bakes done, it's time for us to move into iClone, specifically to move into Character Creator and add these decals to our character. Okay, so now as you can see here is our Capt Sanchez character. We are in Character Creator 4, and now it is time to add the decals to the jacket. So we want to select the jacket over here in the scene. We want to hit the Modify tab, and then we want to hit this tab here. It looks like a palette. This is the Appearance Editor. And we want to click Outfits. By default, the garment you selected should show up already selected here. We want to hit this checkbox. This little fire icon, it looks like, actually means decals or appearance modifications. Click on that and select PBR V17 matte. May as well go with the latest stuff always. That will change this material down here. And now we can press this Activate Appearance Editor button. So press that. It's going to get this warning. This is actually a good thing. Just say yes. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the jacket magically takes on the appropriate color. So the next thing we want to do is, once again, back here in the Appearance tab, click on this second jacket that shows this little fire icon or detail icon. Open that up. Go into Decals. Open up Decal 1. Click on Decal 1. And its type, we're going to do the name tag first. So its type is going to be an input. And it's going to prompt us for all of these images. So we go to Base Color, Custom. We navigate to our base color, which is going to be for the name tag, Capt Sanchez 1K PBR Diffuse. Click on that, say OK. Notice it comes out huge. Don't worry about it. We're going to fix that. Same thing here for the normal. Click on this, and we're going to click on the normal for that. We don't have anything for emissive. We do have a roughness. One feature request for, where's my roughness? There we go. One feature request for re-illusion is let me drag and drop from my Finder or file folder images onto these things automatically instead of having to do it manually this way. So now we are going to add the metalness. And click on the AO. That's our ambient occlusion. The height is a bump map. Okay. So we can say bump. Now, if you're looking at your texture and you see background to it for some reason, you can then use this mask and say custom and use the alpha. Okay, it won't hurt anything if you do. So now we have the decal on the character, but it's not where we want it and it's not sized properly. So what I like to do, and you're going to find there is no hard and fast rule for this. You just have to sort of wing it and keep tweaking it. I like to center it horizontally. And then I like to center it vertically so I can see where it is. And now I can start to drop the scale to where I want it. And really, I'm going to want this at about, let's try 0.08. Notice how it gets blurry? Don't worry about that. And we're going to fix that. I'll show you how in just a little bit. That might be a little large, so let's do 6.06. Let's move it up into position. So here you can see it's at negative 0.17. Vertical is at 0.02. Wherever you place yours is going to change a little bit. The rotation, I didn't need to rotate it in this instance, but when we do the rank insignia, we will need to rotate it. And then the width. Other things that we might want to modify. Under blend, everything is maxed by default. That's generally okay. I don't feel the need to change any of those. The emboss, you might want to have it look like it's embossed. And in which case, if you turn the intensity down all the way, it just looks blurry. If you turn it way up, then it's like super embossed. Might want to go for something light, like 0.6. Your distance, if you increase that, you see it gets nice and white again, so that's fine. Find something that you like. Smoothing defaults to 1. I'm going to bring that down to nothing. And the height intensity defaults to 0.1. Yeah, I'm going to leave that as 0. I'll make it look like it's just actually right on his chest. And then tweak, if we enable tweak, we can change the contrast, the color. You've got a lot of controls here that you can use. Let's see, let's make this back to 0.5. Oh, instead of having to remember what these values are, if you just want to set them back to their original value, double click on the name and it'll set it back for you automatically. Okay. So contrast, if I come too high, if I come too low, let's see much of a difference there. If it was emissive, you have controls for that. For the roughness, you have controls for that, additional controls. So they give you quite a bit of control, really, on these things. Overall, I'm fine with this decal. So it's time to move on to the next decal, decal 2. Same thing with decal 2, it's an input. And I'm going to speed this up, but basically I'm just going to select the appropriate images for each one of these channels for the PBR. Okay, so now that we have decal 2 added in, we're going to perform the same steps to try to get it positioned on the collar. And I found doing the collar is a little tricky, so bear with me. I'm going to speed this process up a little bit also, just because it's the exact same process as before. Just do a little tweaking to see if you can get it right. Okay, I think that's where I want it, but you can't see it. So let's take a look at some of these other capabilities. The blend, I don't think we need to make changes on. Emboss may help us. So enable. Let's do height. No, height's not doing much. About distance. Smoothing. try tweak. No. So we've got it all there. If I bring it down, so you can see it there. We can see it doesn't look good. I think most of that's that emboss. Okay, so here on the distance, I'm going to bring that up a bit. Smoothing doesn't make too big a difference. The height intensity. Okay, let's see if we can get that up on his collar. Keeps going underneath. I have this problem every time. I don't know why. And then suddenly it'll just work. It's the weirdest thing. So our current rotation is negative 0.08. So we're starting to get some of it to appear in his collar at least. Ah. All right, so we're starting to get on his collar a little bit. I'm just going to keep playing with this. Okay. I like it back a little further. I think that's good. Now, unfortunately, it only has 2 digits of precision, so I can't do 7.5. It just doesn't work. It just goes to 1.7. So that's about as close as we can get it. Overall, I'm happy with that. The one thing I'm still not happy with is that it's blurry. It doesn't stand out. It doesn't look right. And there's a very simple reason for this. So if we click on the garment itself, which is in this case a jacket, the one with this little flame icon next to it, its output size is 512 by 512. That's 1/4 of 1K. I'm really dressing him in this uniform for medium to close shots. I want to have a 2K texture, and bang, you see the second we go to 2K, it's crisp and easy to read. It looks good. Okay. And that's it. That's how you add decals, how you create decals from scratch. You can make really complex decals in Blender. if I get enough people to write in and ask me, I can certainly do that. But for now, I think this is really everything you need to know to get started creating decals in Blender and applying them to the clothing that you have in iClone. All right, so thank you all for watching. Comments, suggestions are welcome, and I'm looking forward to creating the next episode here. All right, and bye.